Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. My name is Paul, the Canadian Snowman, here once again with another awesome video, I hope. We're doing Tordesillas, I guess, how the Pope divided the world between Spain and Portugal. I don't really understand, I don't know what this really means. I just know apparently it's like a religious, because obviously the Pope, Christianity and stuff, and how the Pope did, I guess maybe one's Christian and one's not. I really don't know, but it's religious related, and haven't really dove much into religion on this channel. Kind of controversial, but I don't mind like watching controversial stuff. I think anything is interesting. Religion is definitely interesting. Religion and politics are interesting. I won't get into politics on this channel, but but anyways, I'm open minded to anything. So anyways, I'm not really sure what this means. Does the Pope end up turning these two countries against each other? That's kind of where my mind's at. Or it divided the world, or the Pope kind of made it to where it made the world kind of choose sides between Spain and Portugal, possibly. I'm really not sure, but just this wasn't even on my radar, to be honest. Like it was like on the right side. You know how suggested videos after the last one I did, it was on there. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And click on that, and it's like, why not, right? So we're gonna jump into this, guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts below. We haven't even watched anything yet, so yeah, never mind. Yeah, hit the like and subscribe button below, please. I'd appreciate it. What was I gonna, oh yeah, the Universal Yum box for this month is going to be Greece. I don't know, whenever it comes in, I'll end up doing a video on that. But anyways, guys, we're going to jump into this. Just do it. I don't know what to expect. This might not be controversial at all, for all I know.
The Age of Exploration was...
And of course, guys, I got a shout out to Kings and Generals. They give me a lot of content, amazing channels. Definitely, after this video, check out their content and search for their awesome videos. They got big library to choose from. So, anyways, yeah.
The Age of Exploration was one of the turning points in human history. During the early phase of this age, Portugal and Spain were the preeminent powers. The rivalry between them over the New World's wealth threatened a devastating war within Christendom at the worst possible moment. The Catholic Church would intervene to prevent this from occurring, but its decision would leave a legacy that we still live with today. Welcome to our video on how the Pope split the world between Spain and Portugal. Shout out to Audible for sponsoring this video. Get your first audiobook for free, plus 2 Audible originals when you go. Recently, we've been listening to the Great Age of... like the Ottoman Age of Exploration and other historical audio titles. Kings and Generals to 500. It is the year 1453, the year which many scholars dub as the end of the Middle Ages. Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire for over 1,000 years, has finally fallen to the Ottoman Empire.
So why is it the end of the Middle Ages? Why do they consider that? Is it like if firepower kind of comes into its own, or the Constantinople drops, so that means it kind of is like a switch? Not sure.
Roman Empire for over 1,000 years has finally fallen to the Ottoman Empire. With that, centuries-old patterns of travel and trade in the Mediterranean rapidly changed. One of the main changes as long-standing trade routes closed was the nosedive of Genoa's influence and power. Seeking a new livelihood, thousands of Genoese mariners, cartographers and merchants emigrated abroad. Many ended up in Portugal, and by 1481 there were so many living in Lisbon that Portuguese King João II was advised to expel them by his councillors. However, João realized that the expertise in mercantile activity and sailing the Genoese possessed was far too valuable. Among them was a certain Christopher Columbus, who had washed ashore in the Algarve during 1476 after the merchant fleet he was sailing with was sunk.
I guess maybe a reason it's kind of switched off in the Middle Ages because there's more travel now. It's not all. I guess there's always going to be a war, but I don't know. Like the world kind of opens up more, because Columbus and all these other sailors are kind of like exploring and finding new things and stuff. Maybe I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there and hoping it sticks.
1876, after the merchant fleet he was sailing with was sunk. Columbus made his way to Lisbon, joining his younger brother, who had established a small map-making business. Cartography was a thriving business at the time, fueled by the economic boom that Portuguese royals had created by initiating the exploration and exploitation of West Africa's resources. Sailors from all around Europe congregated in Lisbon, trading spices, slaves, gold, wool, sugar, and other commodities. Continuing his maritime life as a merchant and sugar broker in sailing season, and concentrating on studying during winter, Columbus eventually devised a plan to sail west in order to find India. After failing to convince João II, who was increasingly concentrating on a southern route around the newly named Cape of Good Hope, Columbus went to Spain. There, he eventually secured the patronage of the so-called Catholic Majesties, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, who had recently conquered the Moorish kingdom at Granada. The fact that Portugal had recently succeeded in establishing a route into the Indian Ocean possibly motivated Spanish desire for a route to the exotic, profitable spice lands which was not dominated by their European rival. If such a venture to the west failed, only relatively minor funds would be wasted, but if it succeeded, the Spanish would be wealthy beyond imagining. Was that not a risk worth taking? On September 6, 1492, Columbus set off on his journey from the Canary Islands with his crew and...
It's amazing. I just find in history what gets accomplished through rivalry. I mean, this is kind of only happening because, Spain and Portugal have a rivalry together, and it kind of reminds me of like the space age, the Soviets versus the Americans, how that was basically because of a rivalry, and they wanted to beat each other, for whatever. But a lot gets accomplished when there's a rivalry, and I'm just thinking, like I love history, but I also love the universe and what's out there and all that stuff. I'd love for us to land on Mars and all that stuff. And so I want like the Chinese or whoever, India, whoever, to kind of come into like the space race again, where it's like because if there's a race, if there's some kind of like where the Americans are afraid of somebody else kind of taking over, they'll jump back into it more seriously, and we'll get a rivalry, and we get a bunch of people going to Mars, and it gets exciting. I'm sorry. I can go on about that now. We're talking about this right now. I'm sorry. It's just interesting what rivalries, what can come out of it.
92, Columbus set off on his journey from the Canary Islands with his crew and 3 ships, the Nina, Pinta and Santa Maria, on a voyage that would change the world forever. After a months-long journey involving many trials and tribulations, land was finally spotted on October 12th. This first landmass was probably one of the Bahamas and was named San Salvador by Columbus. After meeting the locals and viewing many exotic things, Columbus began exploring further. October 28th saw the flotilla reach the island of Cuba, and on January 18th it set off for home after trade with the natives and searches for gold. After a perilous return voyage, during which his ship was racked by storms, and after being imprisoned by the Portuguese on the Azores, Columbus's battered ships docked at Lisbon for repairs. He was apparently unable to get to Spain right away. However, it is also speculated that Columbus purposely came to Lisbon in order to brag of his successful voyage to King João II. Given the Portuguese monarch's reputation for brutality, it seems like a bad idea on Columbus's part. Nevertheless, upon docking at Lisbon aside a giant Portuguese warship, Columbus sent word to João of his arrival from the Indies and entertained the locals with exotic prisoners and the novelty this represented.
I don't think he purposely went out there to brag. I think, man, that was a long voyage. He was just in jail. he wanted the first piece of land kind of just to get his bearings back together and get food and all that stuff. And while he was there, obviously with the things he's discovered, he's going to brag about it. But I don't think he went there for the sole purpose of bragging about it. But man, I would if you just found like unknown land somewhere. Man, you're going to want to tell someone about it. I mean, all the sailors, you're not going to be able to keep them quiet. I mean, that's like crazy, cool stuff to talk about.
In short order, news of the voyage would spread throughout Europe. While his ship was being repaired, Columbus was summoned by the king and so set off inland. Upon his arrival at the court, he and the king supposedly talked freely, despite Juot's agitation at Columbus's arrogance and his loss of the opportunity. However, he also informed Columbus that, regretfully, whilst he was greatly pleased with the success of the voyage, the new discoveries belonged to him and not the Spanish monarchs because of earlier treaties and papal donations. This was the first indication of conflict between the two states over the New World. When the explorer eventually managed to get back to Spain, he was treated like a hero and received graciously by the monarchs. As Columbus was telling his riveting tale to the royal court, Juot II publicly announced that the newly discovered lands belonged to Portugal, and even ordered a mighty armada to shadow Columbus on his next voyage to occupy this new land for the Portuguese crown. In return, the Catholic majesties of Spain maneuvered their fleets closer to Portugal, preparing for conflict. Realizing Portugal's naval might was superior, Ferdinand and Isabella sent the matter to be decided by the one person whose authority was beyond question, the Pope in Rome. At this point in history, the Pope was a man with the pontifical name of Alexander VI, but he is better.
Okay, now like the Pope's getting. Okay, I was trying to think like where does religion and the Pope come into this? Because like you're like a third way through the video, and like, no, how's this come into play? But of course, the Pope's gonna side, with the country that carries its beliefs, or I guess that's in his best interest or whatnot. So here we go.
The Pope was a man with the pontifical name of Alexander VI, but he is better known as a certain Rodrigo Borgia. Borgia was a very capable man who had served as the vice-chancellor for the previous...
This is off topic, I'm sorry. I've seen some series on Netflix called The Borgia. I haven't seen it. I think it's about a pope. And if any of you have seen it, let me know in the comments below if it's a good series and if it's the same pope from this era. That'd be kind of cool to know. I've just seen like the name and like the little trailer that it posts on that Netflix. I think it's Netflix.
Borgia was a very capable man who had served as the vice-chancellor for the previous pope, and whose political ambition was of the highest order. Under the weak leadership and subsequent death of Innocent VIII from 1484 to 1492, a period of chaos had stricken Rome, and it was clear that a pope strong enough to restore order was needed. So, on August 11th, 1492, Borgia took the papal throne. Upon receiving the envoys from Ferdinand and Isabella, whom Borgia had always viewed favourably, in April 1493, the Pope began taking into account the precedents set in rulings from previous decades and issued the first of 3 edicts. Its name was the Inter Caetera. This edict was known as a papal bull, named after the bulla seal used to authenticate a public decree made by the Pope, and was usually reserved for important topics. These edicts were the sole basis for any European claim on the New World discovered by the Spanish and Portuguese crowns, and provided a justification for the conquest of the Americas for centuries to come. Moreover, they were the wedge that drove European nations into centuries of intermittent warfare over colonial wealth and prestige. The first Inter Caetera, dated May 3rd, 1493, granted Spain the exclusive right to travel in, trade with, or colonize the discovered lands, provided they were not already the possession of a Christian ruler. However, the wording of this bull was quite vague, much to the dissatisfaction of the Catholic majesties. So they again sent ambassadors to the Pope. Instead of begging the Pope for a favour, the Spanish ambassadors chastised Borgia's lack of support for his native land, as he was by birth a native of Aragon. It was suggested that Ferdinand might hesitate in the future to offer military aid to the papacy. This was crucial, as the French king Charles VIII claimed sovereignty over Naples and would have to march through Rome to get there. These political pressures led to 2 new papal bulls, which were more favourable to the Catholic monarchs. The second edict, known as Eximiae Devotionis, clarified and rephrased the first bull. It placed emphasis on the rights granted to Portugal in Africa, Guinea, and the gold mine and elsewhere in previous decades, whilst granting Spain those same rights over the lands to the west which had been discovered by Columbus. Concluding the trio was the second Inter Caetera. The vague language of the first was replaced by a precise line of demarcation in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, drawn arbitrarily on a north-south boundary around 100 leagues west of the Azores and Cape Verde. All lands to the east of the demarcation line would belong to Portugal, while all lands to the west would be under Spanish dominion. No other ships were legally allowed to sail in these waters without the consent of these empires. As the word of the bulls spread, the resounding implications of Borgia's act became clearer to all.
Okay, so, and this is decided by the Pope. So this is kind of like, I'm not a religious person, I've said this before, but it's kind of interesting, these countries and their kings, they have their own power. They actually have like physical power. And I guess like the Pope just has a lot of influence, right, over like a lot bigger area, all of Europe basically. And so it's like they want, I guess the Pope can kind of like persuade other countries to go to war against a country that's not favorable for the Christian church, I guess. It's just kind of amazing. I know only Spain can kind of rule over here and Portugal kind of rule over here. But I just say like, Greece wanted to come out and do some exploring. It's against the law because the Pope's only granted these countries. This seems kind of crazy, but I guess that's how it was back then. But yeah, it's not going to surprise me if a war breaks out because of this. Because like, come on, like no one country owns this area. One country owns this area of places that aren't even discovered yet. So definitely interesting stuff, man. Oops, I didn't mean to go back again.
Without the consent of these empires. As the word of the bulls spread, the resounding implications of Borgia's act became clearer to all. Columbus was quickly arranging his second voyage, while Juo II was furious at being diplomatically outmaneuvered. However, just as Spain's monopoly over the vast regions west of the demarcation line had been secured by papal decree, so too had the Pope secured Portuguese monopoly over Africa and most of Asia. So, Juo did not send his fleet to the west, fearing it would undermine his own gains. The Pope was probably...
And I forget that, Spain and Portugal, I've done a series on like, Ferdinand, like discovery and stuff like that, but it's like you forget that those are like 2 superpowers back then when it comes to the land. And because my first thought when it comes to Navy and exploration goes straight to like, Britain, obviously, because, they're the giant empire they built and stuff too. But before then, obviously, Spain was big and Portugal was big, and I think they're kind of underestimated when it comes to like this kind of stuff because I think the history that's to come after this kind of overshadows it, unfortunately. But that's why I think all this stuff is really cool because we don't really know a whole lot about it. Anyways.
To the west, fearing it would undermine his own gains. The Pope was probably rushed by the necessity of averting a potentially devastating war between Christendom's most powerful nations. Nevertheless, Juo II immediately objected, not satisfied with any decision that might hinder Portuguese maritime opportunities at the very moment his naval strength was at its height. Still, Juo did not care to...
Sorry, I'm going to pause for a second. And I was going to say, like, I'm surprised Portugal isn't even more upset because, okay, they already know kind of what's discovered on like the west side of that line, I mean, or the east side of that line, the African coast. I mean, that's already been discovered, so they pretty much already know what's there. You think they're like, there could be so many more riches over in this undiscovered area. You think that, they'd be like, hey, I want a piece of that action. I guess that's kind of what this is going down.
Very moment his naval strength was at its height. Still, Juo did not care to launch any fleet into the Spanish-appointed territories, fearing papal wrath and excommunication. Spain held almost all the cards in negotiations. So, Juo took stock of the situation and settled down to negotiate, hoping to salvage what he could from the situation. In March of 1494, a delegation of Portuguese officials visited Spain and, after months of debate, eventually reached a historic agreement on June 7th, the Treaty of Tordesillas. It was mostly just a reaffirmation of the papal bull's conditions, but had a few
Emuade Max is a scientifically proven and doctor-recommended treatment for nail fungus. The combination of
additions. One of these was the planned joint Spanish-Portuguese expedition to the Cape Verde Islands and beyond, during which boundary towers would be established. However, this ambitious endeavour was put on hold. The most significant deviation from Borgia's papal edicts was in the placement of the demarcation line. While the Portuguese king acknowledged Spain's legal rights in the territories of the West, he argued that because his ships constantly navigated these waters, the boundary was simply too narrow. These claims were acceptable to the Spanish, and both sides eventually agreed that the new line would run north to south 370 leagues, or around 1,200 miles, west of Cape Verde instead of 100 leagues.
Okay.
Many historians believe that the Portuguese monarch was actually aware of the lands in Brazil before the treaty, and that his insistence in moving the line was to protect his rights to that land. However, the official discovery of Brazil actually came 6 years after the treaty.
Wow.
After a subsequent series of voyages increased tensions even more, the Treaty of Tordesillas was confirmed.
That is so smart, man. It's like they secretly knew about this other land in Brazil and got that line pushed to avoid, because obviously if Spain knows about this, they're not going to allow this movement of the line. And that is very smart. And then they still kept it a secret for another 6 years. That's pretty genius.
Series of voyages increased tensions even more. The Treaty of Tordesillas was confirmed by papal bull Air Quay in 1506, giving sanction to its terms and the line of demarcation. In the decade that followed, Spain only profited slightly from the Tordesillas Treaty that it had so fervently pushed the Pope to support. Meanwhile, the apparent loser, Portugal, was still growing rich and powerful as Europe's spice supplier, due to the fact that it had consolidated its eastern gains in India and Indonesia. Not to be outdone, Spain tried again, led by another explorer, Ferdinand Magellan.
Yep.
He was an experienced sailor and soldier, having already embarked on numerous expeditions into Africa and India by 1517, and knew about Portugal's plans and operations. These deeds aside, he was hated by the new king Manuel I, who had succeeded Juo II in 1495. After Magellan's request to lead a fleet to the Indies was refused, and he was publicly humiliated by Manuel, the 37-year-old left Portugal. Continuing the Columbus-inspired tradition of being rejected by Portugal and embraced by the Spanish, Magellan quickly appeared at the court of Charles I, and the future Holy Roman Emperor welcomed Magellan to his service. After presenting a plan to find a route to the Spice Islands through Spain's half of the world, Magellan had much better luck than Columbus. Charles I realized that any success in such a bold maritime venture would check Portugal's success, increase his own wealth, and consolidate his rule. So, by spring of 1519, Magellan had signed an agreement with the Spanish monarch, almost definitely to the great irritation of Portugal. After numerous attempts by Manuel to convince or coerce Magellan into returning failed, The commander set forth from the Guadalquivir River's mouth on September 20th, 1519, with 5 ships.
So I know this is not going to surprise me because I've already done a video just on like Magellan and like what he discovers, and if you really want to know like the details of that voyage, you definitely check out that playlist. There's 2 videos from 2 different explorers, and it's really interesting stuff. So you just should definitely check that out if you want to know the more details of how it went and how they survived and all this interesting, cool stuff.
Guadalquivir River's mouth on September 20th, 1519, with 5 ships. The details of this famous expedition are best left for a future video of their own. But despite Magellan's own death in the Philippines during mid-1521, the remnant of his...
Okay, good. Then I'm glad they're not covering it, so that's good. Because I've already covered it.
Magellan's own death in the Philippines during mid-1521, the remnant of his voyage managed to return to Spain. This was the first circumnavigation of the globe. Naturally, the mariners had to pass through Portugal's half of the world to get home, and they had also taken spices from the Moluccas Islands, which the new king of Portugal, João III, declared were his by right. Determined to avoid war yet again, the monarchs of Spain and Portugal agreed to hold a conference at which the greatest cosmologists, navigators, cartographers, and other educated people would discuss the division of the world, since its dimensions were now more well known. Still, 2 more fleets were launched to the Spice Islands, the Moluccas, by Spain, and they even fought a few small-scale battles with Portuguese ships. Events over at the other side of the world, in the lands Columbus had discovered, now proved to be most important. Any expedition to the Spice Islands proved so costly as to consume any possible profit, but Hernán Cortés's expedition to modern Mexico began to open up the true wealth of the Americas to Spain. Now the Spice Islands were secondary, and Charles would concede them. The 1529 Treaty of Zaragoza settled the issue once and for all, at least between Spain and Portugal. Both empires agreed that the line of demarcation on the far side of the world would fall to the east of the Spice Islands, in effect giving them to Portugal. In return, João III, who was becoming increasingly wealthy from spice trade profits and lacking any costly military engagements in European politics, gave Charles I 350,000 gold ducats. Of course, this treasure haul was subsequently used to wage war against France. This historic agreement ended the first great battle over control of the world's most valuable commodities and refined the boundaries established in 1493. Though it lessened the dangerous maritime rivalry between Spain and Portugal, empires do not reign supreme forever. Soon, rising powers such as England, the Dutch Republic, and France would begin to challenge Iberian hegemony over the New World. In the 1520s, however, Spain was just beginning its ascent to its status as the world's premier state of the 16th century. The quantity of gold leaving the Americas for Spain gradually increased through the 1500s, from 52,700 pesos worth with Cortés's first expedition to a massive 800,000 in 1570. With the discovery of this seemingly limitless wealth, the age of colonization began.
Nice.
We always have more stories to tell, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel.
Wow. That is like super cool stuff, man. I didn't realize, that there was lines and only 2 countries basically had power over those lines. So that is just definitely like just super interesting stuff. And this video is definitely not what I expected at all. Like divide the world. I didn't realize he literally meaning divided the world. Like I didn't expect that's what it meant. I thought we're talking about war, like countries, being divided, like a bunch of countries on one side, a bunch of other countries like me on Portugal's side, it divided that way. But didn't realize that they literally mean like divide the world, for discovery. And obviously once they knew the entire world, it's like, man, time to lay our claim, because then they basically knew exactly what was out there, and there's only so much land to go around. It wasn't like infinite amount of land, that was definitely really cool and awesome to see. And it just shows, that, like I said, power doesn't last forever. And, you know, that's just that's been changing over time. Like right now, America is the world superpower, and they kind of control a lot right now. But that's pretty much only within the last, like, what, like 70 years, you know, and which is a short time in history. And it makes it, and then, because here you have Portugal, Spain, then you have France and England, all these like power switches. It just makes you think, when in the future, 100 years from now, you know, India's kind of growing in technology, and they're doing a lot better. China's kind of, got a lot going on, and are rising in a lot of areas. And it makes you wonder what the world is going to look like as far as exploration, and also in space, like I said, where that's going to lead everyone. I don't know. And it makes you think a lot, and everything's kind of very interesting to see the power struggles. And there's also kind of really cool to see, like, the Pope. He kind of, like, helped cause this rivalry, but also kind of kept it in check. He kind of kept each side in check, where they didn't go to war with each other, because I think he was kind of like the middleman. And if he wasn't there, these two countries probably do go to war with each other. So it's kind of the influence of the Pope kind of stopped this war, which is very interesting, in itself. So yeah, cool stuff. Let me know about what your thoughts are in the comments below. Always love to see it and hear it. So yeah, anyway, hit that like and subscribe button. I hope you liked this video. I thought it was really cool. Definitely unexpected. I didn't really realize, exactly how, you know, a lot of this information will definitely stay with me, because the dividing of the world, I thought, was just really cool and interesting, and how the Pope is involved. Cool stuff. I actually thought this would be a lot more religious than it was. I thought, it was going to almost kind of going to be like a religious battle, but not at all. So yeah, definitely cool stuff. Hit that like and subscribe. I'm going to be out of here, guys. And yeah, see you guys in future videos. I am out here. Peace. You guys have a great day.